Parenting is such a big deal. You have this child, and what do you do with it? And when they're born, they end up dominating your life. But it's exciting, and at the same time, it's draining. Parenting can be so rewarding at times, and other times you're just overwhelmed with the thought of parenting that little life. And one of the hardest parts is just when you get it figured out, they change. They're different. And what you have to do as a parent has to change. Your goals change. So whether you're a parent or a grandparent, you're constantly adjusting your goals with those little lives that you're helping to raise. And ultimately, the goal isn't about raising them so that they stay with you or even keeping them safe. What you really want is for them to grow up to be healthy, young, well-adjusted adults raised to lead. We're in our second week of talking about raising kids to leave, but not just leave as well-adjusted, healthy adults in there. And that's not always an easy thing to do. I've got a great story. It's a true story. I know that because I got it off the internet this week. It's a mom, and she's driving down the street in her minivan. She's got a minivan full of kids. Her oldest is a 5-year-old who's sitting in the seat right behind her. And this mom's got all this stuff on her mind. She's driving along. She looks over, and a car has pulled up next to her as they're driving down the road, two-lane road next to her. It's a convertible with the top down, and there's a woman driving, and she doesn't have a stitch of clothes on. And she's like, oh no, I can't believe this. And my kids are right in the minivan. Just about that moment, her 5-year-old boy goes, Mom, do you see that woman? And she's going, oh, she's not wearing a seatbelt. In a few years, he might notice something different, right? Because kids change. And how do you raise them through all the changing things? And of course, this series is looking at what can we do as parents to have a positive impact on who our kids ultimately become. And Jack started us off last week, if you'll remember, and he talked about one of the things that is so crucial that we do is we lay this kind of foundation in their faith. We want to make sure that they have what he called an internalized faith. In other words, it is a faith that is real and genuine and is their own. They're not just taking our faith in a plastic or ungenuine way, but they've made their faith their own, not just externalized, but internalized. Now, what I want to do this week and next week, I want to cover 4 things that I think pertain to all of this. So let me tell you what these 4 things are that we're going to cover in the next, this week and next week. And the first one is this. I want us to talk about cultivating our child's sense of identity, that is so important for them when they become adults. They've got to know who they are in God, cultivating that identity. Then the other thing that we're going to talk about here today is teaching our children what to do with their dominion. You remember Genesis says that God created us with dominion, and dominion is all about authority. God's given us authority over things. And of course, with authority comes responsibility. With authority comes the need to be able to make decisions about life. And if we want our kids to grow up and do well, they've got to learn how to make decisions. And I'm telling you, we live in a world where there are a lot of young people out there on their own, and they're not very good at this decision-making business. And what happens then is their dominion that should be a blessing ends up being a curse in their life. Now, next week, there are 2 things we're going to talk about next week. The first one is teaching our kids what to do with their will. If you have dominion, you have will. You have desires that are really deep. You have appetites that go with you as being a human being. Now, having a will can be really good. There are good things about having a will. But there are also bad things about having a will, right? Having a will is what drags us into bad temptations and bad actions all of the time. And don't we want our kids to understand their will and know how to handle it? Because it's not like they're going to lose their will, right? It's right, unless your kid's way different than mine. My kids never lost their will for anything. And we want to teach them the good and the bad of having a will. And then lastly, next week we're going to talk about building a healthy relationship with our kids, a healthy adult relationship. Because our relationship with our kids is going to change over time. And eventually we want to have a kind of relationship, a parent-child relationship, but parent-adult-child relationship that's healthy. So that's what we're gonna try and cover in this week and next week. And I may be biting off more than I can cover here, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. So let's talk about cultivating our children's sense of identity, because this is really important. Now, there are two types of kids out in the world that you see, that I see. It's the one type is the kid who gets up in the morning, he looks in the mirror, right? Or she looks in the mirror and says, I like the kid I see in the mirror. I like that dude or that dudette, right? They've got a future and they can make things happen. And I bet when I leave here and go out to school or the world or the playground or wherever I go, my first job, wherever it is, there are going to be people that are going to look at that guy, that dudette, and they're going to like him too. And there's this kind of confidence that goes with it. And whether they fail in life, because right, we're all going to have failures in life. That's part of life. We're all going to have bad moments. We're all going to have good moments. Whatever they face, there's something about their identity that goes deeper than their circumstances. And they can look at that and say, it'll be okay. I know how to move forward. Now, there are also kids that get up in the morning and they look in that mirror and they say to themselves, I don't know if that kid is really okay. I don't know if that kid is worth loving, worth admiring, worth being friends with. I don't know if I even like that kid in the mirror, see? That kid then is going to play that out when they leave there. They're going to have very low confidence that anybody else is going to think well of them. They're going to have very little confidence about whether or not they can pick themselves up. And that all stems from their sense of identity. Now, here's the thing to remember about this. Parents, grandparents, we don't get to choose what our child's identity will be. We don't get to choose what our child's calling and purpose in this world is. We don't get to choose that, okay? That's God's choice. God is the one who created them in all of their uniqueness. So we don't get to decide that for them. Rather, they've got to journey through life toward adulthood to figure that out, to seek God, to figure out what His summons on their life is going to be. And if they can begin to figure that out, it will fill them with confidence and a sense of purpose that transcends this world. And that's what we want. We want our kids to have that sense of connection to something bigger than this world. We want them to feel like I have purpose in this universe because there's something like God on the outside of this universe who's called me to that. And that's why this is so important here. And there's a great passage that I want us to look at that points to some of this. Turn to Luke chapter 2. Turn to Luke chapter 2 in this. And while you're turning to Luke chapter 2, I'll set up the passage. What we're going to read here are the very first recorded words of Jesus, okay? What Jesus has to say, the very first time Scripture records him saying something. Now, what's happened here is his family, Mary and Joseph, and probably aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and townsmen from Nazareth have traveled down as they would every year at the Passover feast. And there'd be a number of things that they would go through in the temple. There'd be sacrifices they would offer. This would be a very special time. They would save up money all year long to make this trip. And they would do this year after year after year. Jesus is now 12 years old. And so you got to picture Jesus as a 12-year-old. And they all come down there, they go through all of their stuff, and now it's time to leave. And Jesus has been through this many other times. And when they would leave, again, they would caravan together. There could be a lot of them. There may be 100. I don't know. We don't know for sure, but there would have been a lot of them, families traveling together. And you all know what happens in the story, right? Some of you know what happens in the story. They all leave, but they all assume Jesus, is in the other wagon, right? Leaving there. He's in minivan A, with the cousins. But he's not. Jesus is still back in Jerusalem. They travel for an entire day before somewhere they have a conversation, with, hey, Mary, have you seen Jesus? No, I thought he was with, Henry and their group of people. No, I'll go ask him. And then they go over there and all of a sudden they start asking around. They realize we've lost Jesus. That's a bad deal. Can you imagine the conversation? I always thought about this. There's got to be a conversation between Mary and Joseph. And here's Mary. Joseph, I gave you one thing to do this whole trip. Just don't lose the Messiah. Yeah. And you lost him, right? Bad moment when you lose the Son of God. I can just see Mary. What am I going to tell Gabriel? This is not working out. So they turn around and they head back for Jerusalem. Probably takes them another day to get back to Jerusalem. Scripture says, I think it takes somewhere around 3 days after they get there to find Jesus. It's been like the better part of a week, and they finally find Jesus. Okay, so you got to picture this. They find Jesus in this moment. And you can imagine all the emotion. I bet they were scared to death, and when they saw him, they were so relieved. There may have been tears. I bet there was some anger involved. Have anyone ever lost one of your kids? Yeah, they're like, I don't know if I really want to raise my hand on this deal. I've lost our kids. It's kind of a family thing. My parents lost my sister for a while, and it just, it all worked out. But sometimes there's a little anger. I know, another sermon story, another time. It's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. And why did you leave me? It's kind of that deal going on. And so it falls to Mary to have the conversation with Jesus because, there's this. How do you discipline the Son of God here on this deal? Where were you? What's going on here? So they have this conversation here. And look at the passage. Look at verse 48. Look at verse 48. Luke chapter 2, verse 48. His mother said to him, son, why have you treated us like this? Yeah, why did you do this? She's mad. Why did you do this? Do you know how worried we were? It's been like the better part of a week, and I thought I lost you, and what if Gabriel shows up and just, that's kind of what she's feeling there in this moment. Have you all ever seen an old movie called Home Alone? It's kind of the same thing, yeah, isn't it? Yeah, Kevin is forgotten at his house when all of his family leave for a European vacation or something. They're gone for a long time. They come back, and you remember the scene when Kevin's mom walks through the door and sees Kevin. Remember what Kevin does? He's like, oh, he comes running down and grabs his mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I really do want you. I'm sorry. I wished you away or whatever. Just lots of tears, remorse. Remember that? Okay. What happens here is very different, okay? What Jesus says and reacts to in this moment is very different. Look back now. Look at verse 49. Here's what he says. Why were you searching for me? Question. Now, just a side note here. Jesus is going to make an entire ministry that is going to be so profound on the teaching side, and oftentimes the way Jesus taught was by asking questions. And here he is asking this first question. He's, in a way, even as a 12-year-old, he's teaching Mary something here. And we're going to look at what Mary learns here in these next moments. But look what he says after that. He says, why were you searching for me, he asked. Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? I had to be in my Father's house. Now, it's kind of interesting, because there's another house, and this house and household is larger than his earthly household. It is a household that is about something greater than this universe. It is a household and a summons that is connected to the creator of this universe. It's his Father's house, his heavenly Father. And so when he says this, you got to understand what he's doing here in this moment. It's very profound. What he's saying here to his mom is, Mom, there is a higher summons on my life than your summons. There is a call on my life that may be in conflict with what you've called me to. And that call may cause you pain, but I have to follow it. I have to follow it even if it causes you pain, even if it's in conflict with what you would want or desire on my life. And I think in a way, every parent, every Christian parent has to face that same thing in some way. You realize Jesus has a very unique calling, right? He is the actual Son of God. His calling is to come to this world to be the Redeemer of this world. No one else has that calling, quite unique. But all of us have a purpose and a calling in this world that comes from that same Heavenly Father. And your calling is also quite unique. The calling of your children is quite unique. And here's why I bring this up. You and I don't get to decide what that calling is. We get to shape it. We get to play an important role in it. But that calling on your child's life, on your grandchild's life, isn't yours to decide. And it may very well be that there will be things that God calls your children to that will be in conflict with what you desire for them. You may not like the risk that it puts them in. You may not like the pain that it puts them in. But it is their calling, not yours. There may be moments where one of your children is called to face pain or suffering or difficulties in this world, and you would do anything to have them avoid it. But it's part of the journey that God has them on. There may be a calling that God has on your kids to summon them into ministry of some sort, either as a vocation or either as a volunteer. And you may not like the risk that it puts them in. There may be things that cause you to feel uneasy about it. But at the end of the day, as their parent, what you most desire is that they would follow God's calling in their life, even if you don't like it. See, that's what Mary had to face. That's what we all have to face. And so there comes this thing where as we raise our kids in a very practical way, what we want them to begin to understand is that summons in their life is a part of their identity, and it is bigger than just this world or this universe, because it is a summons that is attached to the creator of this universe. And our job is to help them become aligned with that, not us. We don't parent for ourselves, and that's one of the challenges I want to give you here today. We don't parent so that we will feel good. We don't parent with the purpose that our kids will grow up and think well of us. We don't parent for the purpose that it will give us a great reputation. We parent for the purpose of raising those kids to know who they are in God and to have the confidence to live that with boldness. And sometimes those things go together quite well. Other times it will cause us some real discomfort. But the point is, we want our children to know who they are. So can I give you some really practical application on this one before we move on here? Just a couple of things. One of them is this. Oftentimes, and this is true for me, I'm just gonna be real vulnerable with you here for just a second. You know, I grew up in a very low conflict family. My parents got along great, not passive aggressive. They were just low conflict. It was great for growing up in, but it was lousy for me when I got married, because my marriage has a lot more conflict than what my parents had. And I don't always know what to do with it. To me, whenever there's conflict or anger, you're supposed to make it go away as fast as you can, okay? That's what you're supposed to do. Now, not really, okay? Now, are there times when we're parenting that as parents, we're gonna get mad or angry with our kids? You bet, that's normal. Sometimes that anger is a good and healthy thing, okay? Sometimes it's unhealthy. But in the end, what we don't want to do, here's why I'm sharing this. In the end, what we don't want to do is raise our children to think that their job is to keep us from being angry. That's not our children's job. And too often in Christian families, we get this idea that families should have no anger. Now, that may not be your family. That's kind of what I grew up with, low, anger. And so I kind of took that into my marriage, and I wanted my marriage to be, no anger. I wanted us all just be one big happy family. No, why does anyone have to get mad at anybody? Well, that's just not this world, okay? Not this reality. And I've had to be really careful not to raise my kids to begin thinking that they've got to take responsibility for the things I get angry about. You know whose responsibility it is to deal with my anger? Take a wild guess. Me, yeah. I'm the one angry. It's my issue. I'm the one that needs to deal with it, not my kids. You know what? Sometimes God gets angry with you and me. And that's okay. That's okay. But you know what? God's big enough to deal with his own anger. It's not my job to dissipate God's anger. Now, when he's angry with me, I want to find out why. I want to understand why there's issues there. But my job as a Christ follower is not to nurse God or cajole him in some way so that his anger goes away. Okay? And in the same way, we've got to be careful of that. And here's what I've noticed. Sometimes when my kids do something wrong and I get angry about it and we have this discussion, or I let them see my anger a little bit, sometimes my kids respond in kind of a remorseful way. They say sorry, they do that stuff. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes when my kids realize, oh, I crossed the line, wasn't supposed to do that, I feel genuine remorse or regret over something I did wrong, and I want to make it right. You know what? That's a good thing. When our kids feel that and want to take responsibility and do the right thing out of it, that's a good thing. But sometimes I've noticed this with my kids. Sometimes they say sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. They go into that. And it's not about them. It's about them wanting to get mom or dad to not be angry anymore. And here's what Angie and I have done. Here's what I've had to learn this the hard way, but here's what Angie and I do in those moments. In those moments, we stop and say, no. I don't want to hear sorry in this moment. And we literally tell them this. Your job is not to make me happy. Your job is not to handle my anger, okay? I'm angry about something right now, but you don't have to worry about it. I'm the one that has to deal with that. I don't want my kids growing up thinking that somehow part of their job in life is to deal with other people's anger. I don't want them to grow up in life and when their boss gets mad at them or angry with them, they think they've got to fix their boss's anger. I don't want them to grow up and think that if their spouse gets angry, that they've got to fix their spouse's anger. I don't want them growing up, having my future grandkids try and solve their anger issues, okay? They'll get this same little speech from me if they do that. Right? We don't want our kids doing that. And here's the other thing that happens. When they're busy trying to make their parents happy and pleased and take care of our problems, you know what they're not focusing on? What God has called them to do and what God has called them to be. So, in a real practical way, don't let your kids be responsible for your anger, or if you're unhappy about something or struggling with something, don't raise your kids to take care of you. That's not how this works, but that occurs all too often. What they need is love. They need unconditional love from us that says it's okay when you fail. There may be consequences, but we still love you. They need love that says it's okay when we're angry with you. Mom and dad can be angry with you, but we still love you. Just like I know there are times when God is angry with me, but you know what I know? God still loves me. God still loves me, and it's okay, right? They need love to know they can go out and risk seeking God and that it's okay. And you know what else you can do, parents, that is so powerful? Ask them questions. don't try to tell them what God wants to do in their lives. Make them do the work. Ask them questions. Ask them about their passions. Ask them about what God is saying to them. Ask them questions. Get them thinking. Get them into the mode of searching. Let them know their life has meaning and purpose, and it is their job above all other people to figure out what that calling is, okay? You do those things, and man, your kids are gonna be seeking that identity. Good things will happen in their lives. Now, this other thing here that I wanna spend the rest of my time on here is training them what to do with their dominion, right? All your kids have dominion, and it causes problems because that means they have a sense of authority. They have a sense, they have like an internal feeling that they can just tell you differently than what you're telling them. And so how do they handle this? What do you do with this? Now, primarily with dominion, it means that we are creatures that have to make decisions. God did not let us off the decision-making hook. God didn't swoop down and say, oh, Adam, let me help you name that animal. You were struggling there for a moment. No, God said, you've got dominion over that. That's your job, Adam. Take care of it. It's your decision to make. And we want kids that are going to grow up and know how to make decisions. Nothing is more tragic than a kid that grows up and becomes an adult and can't make decisions about their life, because this world will make decisions for them. It will push and pull them, and it will take that passivity and make decisions for them, and rarely are those decisions good decisions. See, dominion is a good thing. It can be bad, but it is a good thing, and we want them to know what to do about it. So here's the number one thing you can do to help your kids know how to handle their dominion someday, and it is a gift that you can give them. They won't like this gift much, but it is a very good gift. You will love this gift. Here's the gift. The gift is this: give them the gift of owning their own problems. Yeah. When they have a problem in this world, don't be the one that swoops in and fixes every single problem for them. Because in the end, they're going to depend on you for fixing all of their problems. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't help them. That doesn't mean that you're not this is not saying abandon your kids emotionally, financially, physically. It's not that at all. But understand this: the goal of parenting is not to get your kids where they get every right answer on the test at school. It's not getting your kids to succeed wildly in every single sport that they try. It's not getting your kids to do really well on that first instrument that they try. It's not getting your kids to be able to get along with all the adults in your life. That you can, if you swoop in and make sure that your kids are successful in every part of their life so that they don't experience any failure, well, when they become an adult, they won't know how to succeed themselves. They'll only know how to succeed when you're there deciding for them. And so what you've got to do is let them fail. Problems are a good thing. And when we learn how to solve problems, when we learn that the problems we face in this world aren't always the end of the world, good things happen. There's a great video that our worship team found. It's a little Capri Sun video commercial about a mom who's so well intentioned. She wants to protect her son and take care of him. But as you see, they kind of have fun with this. It doesn't always work out for the best. So watch this video here.
If Paula Ebert had her way, she would help her child.
Deoxyribonucleic acid. You know that.
With everything.
Go! Go! No! Mommy's here.
But that kind of love is frowned upon.
Fire hydrant.
Isn't that great? Yeah. That's swooping. That's being the swooper parent, okay? And if you swoop in and fix, in the dodgeball game and your kid's about ready to be hit in the face with a dodgeball and you jump in front of it, that's not a good thing. It's okay for a kid to get a bloody nose playing dodgeball. It's okay for a kid to get, yeah, I have an amen on that. It's okay for a kid to get a bad grade. Because they learn, and there's nothing more beautiful than a kid who learns to solve some of their own problems, that is such a confidence builder. Let me give you an illustration on this. A couple years ago, I was at the roller rink on the other side of town. Just about every single weekend, my dad goes roller skating with all of his granddaughters. It's really sweet. And a couple years ago, I went out there with them all and out there roller skating, and I noticed two types of little kids out there. You know, I talked about the two kids in the mirrors. Well, here's where they come from. They come from the roller rink, okay? Think about this. They take these little kids, they're about that old, and they put shoes with wheels on them, and then they put them on a concrete floor. Who thought of that, okay? Yeah, there's gonna be pain, right? That's just gonna happen, yeah. Get out there, yeah, we put wheels on your shoes, go out on the concrete. Yeah, we're on the nice carpet, now we're gonna put you on the concrete. So they go out there, and you know what happens? They fall down. Now, there's one group of kids, and when they fall down, they hit the concrete, and it hurts. When your head hits the concrete, because there's wheels on your shoes, it hurts, and you cry, and you scream. And I would watch as some of these kids would fall, and there'd be like moms that would rush out there. Oh, it's gonna be okay, I'll be there. And they would come out and they would pick them up. And oh, I'm so sorry. And they do lots of tears and all this whole thing. So then what do you think happens? Their kid falls down again because they're wearing shoes with wheels, okay? They fall down again on the concrete. And next thing you know, the parent doesn't even have roller skates on. They're just in shoes, and they're walking their kid around on the rail all the way around the thing. Now, there's another group. This really happened. Kid falls down, little kid falls down, hits the concrete, starts crying, and the mom goes, "You got this one." Yeah, you got this one. Get up, you know. Didn't even go out there. Keep going. Keep going. Mom's got a Coke and a pizza. Yeah, kid falls down again. Bam. Oh, that was a nice one. Keep going. Keep going. Now, true story. 30 minutes later, which kids are still out there roller skating? I'll tell you which. The ones when mom didn't come and rescue them. And there was something about learning that they could pick themselves up, handle the pain, and get back to it again, that built this kind of confidence. They learned that they could solve some of their own problems. If you want your children, your grandchildren to grow up and to be healthy, well-adjusted individuals, they've got to learn how to make decisions, face problems, and solve them themselves sometimes. And so part of this feels harsh. And I'm not saying, don't ever help out your kids. I'm not saying that. I got lots of help from my parents and Angie's parents. They helped us out financially at different points. And, they were there for us. But there's a vast difference between being there for them and being the problem solver in their lives. Let me give you an illustration of a swooper that wrecked things. There's in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, there are two brothers, Jacob and Esau. And these two brothers struggle at getting along. They had problems going all the way back to the womb, okay? They get into these fights, and Jacob steals the birthright here, or he doesn't steal it. He goes through this thing where he's basically just a manipulative jerk is what he does. His brother is like dying of dehydration and hunger because he went out on this hunting trip and didn't get anything done, and comes in and he feels like he's about ready to die, and his brother Jacob's cooking this bowl of stew, and he says, "Can I have a bowl of stew?" "Well, sure, if you give me your birthright," which is a big deal. There'd be a lot of wealth, control, and power that went with that. Then later, when their father Isaac is about ready to die, he's about ready to pass on the blessing, and there'd be a lot of things that would come with that. And these two brothers could not get along. They could not trust each other, and their parents kind of took sides. And what really needed to happen were these two brothers needed to own this relational problem that was in their lives. They needed to own it. Now, mom and dad could come alongside, help them work through it, but they needed to own the problem and solve it between them. But that's not what happened. In fact, over in Genesis chapter, I want to say 27. Yeah, flip over to Genesis chapter 27. You pick up the story, and instead of mom or dad helping, saying, "You know what, you got to work through this. We'll be there, but you're the one that's going to do the difficult work of resolving this issue with your brother." Instead, Rebecca, the mom, swoops in to solve this for the son that she feels like should really get the blessing and the birthright. And so she comes up with this little scheme where when Esau goes out to hunt for this last meal to make for his dad, then he's going to get the blessing, she says, we're going to go kill a goat and because her older son was all hairy, Esau was all hairy, and we've got this little scheme. And here's where we pick it up in verse 11. Look at verse 11, Genesis 27, verse 11. And this is Jacob talking about this plan that his mom has, and he's kind of whining. He's really whining here. Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, but my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a man with smooth skin. This won't work, and we've got this plan. This is a grown man, and he's whining like a little baby here in this deal. Look at verse 12. What if my father touches me? It would appear that I'm tricking him, and he would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. And this one, I don't know what to do. It's just like, dude, grow up and figure out how to solve this thing. But he doesn't. Look what his mom does here in this moment. Look at verse 13. His mother said to him, my son, let the curse fall on me. And let me own the problem here. Then look what she says. Just do what I say. And she makes the stew. She carries out the plan. And the thing you see here in Jacob is a man with no confidence. Now, I'm reading between the lines a little bit here because we don't know the full history on this. But I'd be willing to bet that Rebekah parented that way for many, 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 many years. And so Jacob grows up and he never learns how to take care of any problem himself. He doesn't know how to take care of relational problems. And how do you think this whole thing turns out between the two brothers? You think, her little plan here and all this works out really good? No, these two brothers become bitter enemies, and it's not until way later in their life are they able, through God's grace, to resolve their differences and come together once again. And the saddest thing that you see is Jacob will go the rest of his life and not know how to solve relational problems because he never had to growing up. And when the day came that he was raised to leave, he wasn't prepared to handle problems. And the guy, just problem after problem, he makes the worst decisions constantly, but he was never trained to. He didn't know how to take responsibility for his life. And so parents, we want kids that aren't gonna grow up to be like Jacob. We want them to begin failing at solving problems at a very early age when we're there to help them figure out how to do a better job of it, so that by the time they get to the point that they're leaving our house, they're ready to make decisions. They know who they are in God. They know what God has called them to. And when life throws them a curve, when there's wheels on their feet and they fall down and hit their head financially, with their job, with their marriage, with their own kids, with neighbors, with whatever it is, they can say to themselves, I can solve this. With God's help, I can pick myself up and make decisions about how to handle this. Now, let me give you just a couple points of application on this, and we'll wrap this up. One of them is this. What I'm not saying here is just to abandon your kids on every problem that they solve, okay? It's not that. You want to be there for them, but it's making sure they're the ones that are owning the problem that they're trying to solve. One of the things you can do, let's say your kids are struggling in school. If you've got a kid struggling in school, the grades are going down, and it's, instead of just saying, here's what you're gonna do, why not help your kids frame out the choices? Why not help them? Maybe it's a thing where you empower them to say, okay, here's the problem. Does this mean you're gonna start spending, one choice would be you're gonna spend a lot more time studying. You're gonna come in out of the backyard and you're gonna spend more time studying. Or maybe you need to change classes. Maybe you're in the wrong class. Or maybe we need to find a tutor that can help you out with this. Maybe at the end you help them frame out the options, but you let them make some choices in what's going to happen. Let them own what's going to happen. Otherwise, you're going to do something, we're getting a tutor. You're going to get a tutor because I don't want a tutor. I hate tutors. And then what happens when the tutor shows up at the house? Damn, this was stupid. I knew the tutor wasn't going to work out. They've not owned the problem. All they think is mom and dad don't know how to make good decisions. Well, that's because they haven't made any decisions in life. Have them make a few decisions, and you start looking way smarter in this whole deal, okay? So think about how to form out choices that help them see how you figure out what those choices are, but let them own the choices. You don't have to just say the sky's the limit, do whatever you want, it's your problem. Frame it in, but don't always be exact. I've always admired parents, and Angie and I have kind of copied this. Parents that start giving their kids financial responsibility in the household at a very early age. Things like, here's the money you've got for school clothes. We're gonna, if you want to spend all your money on one pair of pants, well, okay. You may regret this decision later on in the semester, but that's a good thing. They'll spend money differently the next time, won't they? And getting them involved in that stuff is very good. One of the things I've struggled with, and Angie was really good at this, and I had to learn on this thing. We went through a stretch where one of my kids kept forgetting to take their school lunch, kept forgetting to, take the check for money at school, and so I'd get this call on my cell phone, Dad, I don't have any money for lunch. I don't have a lunch. I'm starving. Can you bring it? I'm racing around. I'm bringing them lunch, going down to the grocery store, getting them a Lunchable and a Coke or something. I'm taking, and they kept doing that. Well, when you have your lunch hand delivered by your dad at school, you're going to keep doing that. And Angie's just like, well, they're going to keep doing that until you just say, you're not going to do it. Then they'll figure it out. And I'm like, I know, but and finally I realized, Dad, they'll make us go hungry. And I've come to find out they don't actually do that. They just give you a lunch your kid doesn't like. It's like 2 pieces of bread with a piece of cheese in the middle. Well, after one of my kids ate a couple of those sandwiches, they stopped forgetting to take their lunch because they owned the problem. And there's just a thing there that I had to learn as a parent. There's times to swoop in and help and be there. And there are other times where I look at this and say, here is a great learning opportunity for one of my kids to own their own problem. One of the other things, the last thing here I'll share with you that we did that has really worked out well. I recommend this to all parents. I don't know if I know your kids have never done this. Okay, but mine have. Mine have done this. I know yours haven't done this, but sometimes my kids complain about dinner. Like they don't like the food, they don't want to eat the food, they want something else, they want it at a different time. This went on and on and on and on, and it just was driving us crazy. Finally, Angie and I, has this ever happened to y'all on this deal? Okay, yeah. So here's what we did. When we started this, Coley was like 6 or 7 years old. She was really young. One day, Angie and I just said, okay, we've had it. You know what? From now on, every week, each of you is responsible for cooking one dinner. Okay, so twice a week, our kids are going to cook the dinner. You've got to tell us what ingredients you need for the dinner. You're going to pick what the dinner is. We'll get the ingredients, but you've got to cook it, serve it, and clean up after it. Okay? It's amazing what an attitude adjustment that did when they're the ones serving up the dinner. It's just like, do you like this? What do you think of this? And then all of a sudden they realize there are other people that are going to have opinions about their cooking. And all of a sudden using 40 dishes to cook 10 different meals because everyone wants a different dish at dinner. No, we're serving one thing because they didn't want to clean up all the dishes from everything. And it was just amazing what that did. And you know what's great now? They both know how to cook. Someday, I know they're not going to starve when they leave our house someday. It is great. But part of it was just getting back to me as a parent, learning. And this is such a struggle for me sometimes, but you know what? I've got to let my kids' problems be their problems. Their problems aren't mine, but I get to be a coach. I get to be someone who's on their side to help them learn and grow through those problems, okay? So we can do this with our kids. because the goal is we want them to grow up to be healthy, well-adjusted individuals who know who they are in God and have the confidence to make the decisions to pursue the summons of God in their life. Let me say a prayer, and then Jack's going to come out here. Father, we just we thank you for the gift of children. And we also pray for great wisdom, because they don't always feel like a gift sometimes when we're raising them. But we need your help. And we pray that you'd give us that grace and that wisdom to parent our children and our grandchildren in a way that points them toward you and the call that you have on their lives. Amen.